All right, guys, so if you have clicked on this video, this is going to be the beginning and developing video, so that means that you got one or none of the practice problems correct from the bell ringer. So we are going to be going through the packet slowly, so that way you guys can catch on and make sure that you're following along and understand how to do the wave speed equation. So the first thing I want you guys to do is take a look at your page. You have your equation right here. And then it talks about the what this symbol means. So we have our velocity, and then we have frequency and wavelength, or wave speed is the same thing as wave velocity, and then we have our units. These are going to be really important, so do not forget to label your answers with one of these units. Otherwise, it will not be counted for full credit. So the first thing I want you guys to pay attention to is that when we are going to be doing our word problem, we are going to be listing and filling in this graph, and this is going to help you determine which equation we're going to use and how to manipulate the equation so that we can find the missing unit. So let's take a look at our first problem. It says a wave has a frequency of 50 hertz. So the first thing I want you guys to do is go ahead and underline wherever you see numbers. So you guys should be following along with me right now on your page. So you guys should be following along with 50 hertz and 10 meters. Remember, that's what that M stands for. So then if we take a look at and read the entire equation. So a wave has a frequency of 50 hertz and a wavelength of 10 meters. What is the speed of the wave? And circle what it is we are looking for. So we have hertz, which is the unit for frequency. We have meters, which is the unit for wavelength. And now we're searching for speed. So taking a look at our very first step, what I want you guys to do is list the variables that you have. So we have our velocity, or we don't, but that's because that's what we're looking for. So we're going to put a question mark to represent the fact that that's the variable that we're solving for. We have our frequency, which is 50 hertz, and we have our wavelength, which is 10 meters. So that's our first step, is you guys are going to go ahead and write that down. The second step is that you are going to identify the formula that we're going to be using in order to solve for our missing equation, our missing variable. So we have just wavelength equals, wave speed equals frequency times wavelength. So we write our formula without using any of the variables, so just the formula. And then we're going to substitute the equation with the numbers that we already know. So we know that 50 hertz is going to go in for frequency, so that's going to give us the 50 there. And we know that 10 is going to go in for wavelength, and that's going to give us the number there. So then whenever we have two variables just next to each other, that means to multiply. So then you're going to multiply the two numbers together, 50 times 10. If we take a look at our calculator, 50 times 10 is going to give you 500. So then that's how we have our wave speed is going to be 500. And then don't forget the units, which is meters per squared. And you could always look up here if you need a reminder as to what the units are for your variable. So that's kind of the very first one. I briefly went through it. There's going to be a chance on the next page for you to take a look at a couple more problems. So let's take a look at one more before we start to do one together. So take a look at the top of your second page. Our second problem is a wave has a frequency of 5 hertz. So remember that you guys are going to be underlining your knowns. So we know that there's going to be 5 hertz. We know that the speed is going to be 25 meters per second. And we are looking, so go ahead and circle what we are looking for. And we are looking for the wavelength of the wave. So in the very first step, let's go ahead and list our variables that we know. If you pay attention, it is in the same order. So it goes wave speed, frequency, and wavelength. And the same order for this as well. So wave speed, we know is 25 meters per second. Frequency is 5 hertz, and we are solving for wavelength. So this is the equation that we're going to be using. Right? So it's the same equation as before, and now we're going to put in the known variables into the representatives in the equation. So that's why we have our 25 meters per second that goes right there, because you can see that this V equals this, so that's why it goes right there. We have a frequency of 5 hertz, and so this number is going to go right here, and then we are solving for wavelength, so we're going to leave that as a representation of that's what we're solving for. So we went ahead and we put it in for our known variable. Now we have to solve for what? We have to get this wavelength by itself. So in order to do that, we have to start moving and manipulating the equation. So the first thing that they have you doing here is, because we want to get this wavelength, the lambda, by itself, we need to do the opposite of what's happening here. And as we said before, if there's two numbers that are right next to each other, it's going to multiply together. So in order to get rid of something, we have to do the opposite. So the opposite of multiplication is division. And whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side as well. So on this situation, for this example, we're going to be dividing this by 5, like they said so here. And remember, whatever we do on one side, we have to do the other. So we have to divide 25 by 5 here. And that gets rid of this 5 over 5, and it leaves us with the wavelength equals 5. And that's going to be your answer. So then you write your answer, which is wavelength equals 5, and then don't forget those units. Again, if we know that we're solving for wavelength, we can just take a look at our wavelength chart here, and we know that meters is going to be the unit for that. So I'm going to let you kind of give you guys a couple seconds to look over this. I want you guys to practice doing the same thing I did here. So if you guys need, I'm going to give you guys about 10 seconds on this video. If you guys need to pause and go over everything that we did here and do it here, you can pause it if you need longer time. But I'm going to give you guys about 10 seconds to do the exact same thing. So circle where you have the number, where you put it into the equation to show how you got what you got. So go ahead, 10 seconds starts now. Okay, so that's about 10 seconds. If you need more time, you can pause the video. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and show you what I was expecting you to do. So like we did for the previous ones, I wanted you guys to underline the known, so we know that it's going to have a wavelength of 10 meters. We know it's going to be a speed of 340 meters per second, and we are looking for the frequency. So then when we have our variables, we list what we know. See how it's the same order again. So we're going to just put that we know that the wave speed is 350 meters per second. We do not know the frequency, so we're going to leave that with a question mark, and the wavelength is going to be 10 meters. So the formula that you're going to use, hopefully you wrote this in. So we're going to have frequency, wave speed equals frequency times wavelength. And so then we're going to start to replace the equation with the knowns. So we know that 340 is going to go in for V. We know that 10 is going to go in for the wavelength, which is going to give us our equation. Again, this is multiplication, so we need to do the opposite, which is division, in order to get the frequency by itself. So we have to divide this side by 10 to cancel this out. Whatever we do to this side, we have to do to that side. So then we have 340 divided by 10. So if we take our calculator and we do that, it's going to give us 34. So that's going to give us 34, and then again, don't forget the fact that we need units, and so the units for frequency is hertz. Okay, so that's kind of a summative, really quickly explanation of how you're going to do it, but now we're going to try to do it together. So what I want us to do together is, as I'm writing, I want you guys to be writing this down on your worksheet as well. You can see that we're going to be doing 2 of those together, and then I'm going to let you guys finish the third all the way through the last of the problems on your own. And then that way, that's going to be due by next class. You need to have it done by next class, so hopefully this video will help you get started. And then if you have any questions, you can raise your hand at the end, and I will be happy to go over and help you out. So to follow the same theme as we have been doing over here, let's take a look at our first problem. So a wave with a frequency of 14 hertz. So remember, we're going to underline the knowns. We're going to underline what we do know anytime there's a number. So a frequency of 14 hertz and a wavelength of 3 meters. At what speed will this wave travel? So we want to know what the speed is. So that's what we're circling. So that's what we're looking for. So when we are going to be listing our knowns, pay attention that it's in the same order. So if we're looking for speed, that is going to give us a question mark right there. We have our wavelength of 3 meters, so that's going to go right here. Don't forget to include the units when you write that down. And then we know the frequency is going to be 14 hertz. Okay, so we write that down. We're going to be solving for wave speed, so we are going to just rewrite the formula that we've been working with, which is this. We've got our wave speed equals frequency times wavelength. The same thing that we've been doing. So remember, I want you guys to be writing this down with me as I'm doing it. So we are going to be putting in our numbers, so substitute the given numbers and solve for unknowns. So the 14 is going to go in for the V, so we're going to write that down right here. And whoops, my mistake. This is not going to be the 14. That's what we're solving for, so we are going to leave that blank. The 14 is going in for the F, which is right here, my mistake. And then the 3 is going to go in for wavelength. Okay, and so V is already by itself, so all we need to do is do the multiplication. So 14 times 3. And that's going to give us V equals 42. And then we're looking at speed. So if we take a look at our chart, the speed, our unit is going to be meters per second. Remember, it's really important to include that unit. Okay, so sorry about that mistake. But the 14 is going to go here and the 3 is going to go there. Okay, so let's move on. If you need to pause and go back and repeat any of these instructions, please feel free to do so if there was any point that you were confused. That's the whole point of this video. But in case you got it and you're good to go, we're going to go on to the next one. This is going to be the last one that I want to do with you, and then I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds, or you can pause if longer, for the third one, and then I'll go over this last one, and then you'll be free to do the rest on your own. So let's do this one together again. So the speed of the wave is 65 meters per second. Again, we're underlining what we know. The wavelength is 0.8 meters, and we are looking for the frequency. Remember to circle that. So let's go ahead and write down what our knowns are. So we have our wave speed is 65 meters per second. The frequency is what we're solving for, so we're going to put a question mark there. And the wavelength is 0.8 meters. Okay, and then the formula that we're going to be using is the same one. Wave speed equals frequency times wavelength. We're going to go ahead and put our numbers in. So 65 is going to go in for V. Good. And then we don't know what frequency is, so we're going to leave frequency. And then our wavelength is 0.8, and that's going to go in for that. So we're going to have this go right there. So like I said, we need to get frequency, or F, by itself. So in order to do that, we need to do the opposite. These two are next to each other, so it's multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division. So we need to divide both sides, because whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So this is going to cancel. And then we need to turn to a calculator. And the calculator is going to be 65 divided by 0.8. That's going to give you this number right here. So we're going to write that down on this side. So 81.25, and then we have our frequency on its own. So we don't need to do anything further. And then don't forget, we need to write down the final answer and with the units. So 81.25, and then the units for frequency were hertz. So we're going to write that down here. And then that is your answer. So I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds to do the next one. If you guys need more than 30 seconds, then just go ahead and pause this video. And then otherwise, 30 seconds is all you need, and we'll go over it really quickly. So 30 seconds starts now. You take 5 more seconds. Okay, so that was about 30 seconds. So let's go over and see and check your work and see if you were able to get it right. So we're going to underline our 46 hertz. We know that that's our frequency. We're going to underline our wavelength, and we are going to circle the speed because that is what we are solving for. So we don't know the speed, so that's where the question mark is going to go there. The frequency is going to be 46 hertz. The wavelength is 1.7 meters. We know that the equation we're going to be using is the wave speed equals frequency times wavelength. We're going to go ahead and put the numbers in and substitute it for what we know. So we know that 46, and then this is going to be 1.7, and they're multiplied together. That's going to give us 46 times 1.7. That's going to give us 78.2. So down here, we're going to write our final answer with the units, and then the units for speed is meters per second, and that is our final answer. So if you got this correct, go ahead and move on to the rest of the packet. The rest of the packet is for you to do on your own. If it helps you to draw the step 1, 2, 3, and 4 kind of graphic organizer, go ahead and you can do that here in the space that's provided for you. If not, you can just go ahead and just make sure that you show all of your work, because even if you get the final answer wrong, you can still get credit even if as long as you show your work and I can see where the mistake was. If you need to go over anything again, feel free to go back in the video. Otherwise, if you have any questions, go ahead and raise your hand. This worksheet is due to me by the end of the period, and at the